We're Tom and Alane Waters with Restoration International, and we're excited today that we're going to be talking about amazing love in marriage, and it can get more and more amazing.
Yes, and the amazing love that God has for us, because He's the author of love. He created it, and He is the one who empowers that love to change our hearts.
Yeah, and it's interesting that in the Bible, God actually likens or compares the love of a married couple to the kind of love that Christ has for his people. So it's an opportunity to have amazing love and to also represent a little bit of the relationship of Christ to the people.
That's right, because this amazing love that He has for us is He pursues us even though we don't even have an interest. Think about that. God is constantly pursuing us because He loves us, and we might not even be aware of it. And in our marriage relationships, we need to pursue each other in love. Even if it appears that they aren't interested in the moment, don't give up, keep pursuing.
Yeah, and it's amazing that He loved us before we even knew that He was loving us. And if we put that in the context of marriage, when we are willing to love, even when we feel like our spouse is unlovable, this is a representation of how God loves us. Instead of getting upset and angry, and because you don't love me, I don't love you, that's our default mode. We can love during that time and actually make a difference.
That's right. And God is that power source of love. And the third area that we see this comparison is so beautiful, from Christ to His people to become one, and a husband and wife together to become one, is that He died for us because He loved us, even though we didn't see our need. And in the marriage, if we are willing to set self aside, or we can say die to self, die to my way from having to be right, or my perspective to my wants or my demands, die to that in order to reach out and to minister to our spouse. This is so powerful in the marriage relationship.
Yeah, because our natural tendency, and it's our default mode for all of us, is that when something's not going my way, or you're not making me feel good, then instead of dying to that selfishness or surrendering that to God, we often want to justify, fight back, and love dies in that situation.
That's right. So God is the power of love. He is love. He created it. And in that marriage relationship, when it said Christ died that we can be one with Him, the way He and His Father are one together, then He brings that into this relationship, because it can be a visual demonstration of that love, how it works, and the results of that love. And it's a beautiful thing.
And that's what it talks about in the New Testament. In Matthew 19 and verse 5, Jesus is speaking. He says, "For this cause, a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife." So what is this cleaving talking about? So we're leaving father and mother and we're cleaving. That means we men, this is a call to our hearts, that we are being asked by God in this marriage relationship that we will glue this marriage together, that we will become separated. And then the verse goes on and it talks about let no man separate. That means don't let my attitudes separate me from my wife.
And in that process, when Christ came and He left His home, just as the man is to leave his home, He left His home that He can be one with us. And so this is such a beautiful representation of what God has in store for marriages.
Right.
And to experience the joy and love that He desires us to have in this relationship.
Yeah, so in the book Desire of Ages, in page 151, it says, in both the Old and New Testament, the marriage relation is employed to represent the tender and yet sacred union that exists between Christ and His people.
Yes.
So there it is.
There it is. It's this amazing love. It's being demonstrated to represent. So the Bible is in harmony with this whole concept of why God created man and woman to be one, because it represents His relationship with His Son as one, and now their relationship to us as one. So this is a very beautiful picture. And when we picture God, it's not hard to see love there. But sometimes when we picture our relationship, it's pretty hard to see that sometimes. So we're going to be looking at ways that we can experience this amazing love, what we can do practically to make that love in our relationship grow.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter if we have a great relationship and we think that, well, I've got a great marriage. It can always be better because love grows and becomes more amazing as we're more connected with each other and God.
That's right. So why is it that we don't want to, that we're content where we are? Why is it that we think our marriage is good enough? Or even maybe think, there's no hope for my marriage. When we get these attitudes, it makes it very difficult to break outside of that and to see what God can do, because He's a God of miracles. He's a God of creating miracles in the present here and now. We've experienced miracles in our marriage, and we know you can too. So let's not be content. Let's not feel like there's no hope.
right.
Let's not say we're good enough. Let's not, continue in our dysfunction that we've been comfortable operating in. Let's step forward and see what difference God can make.
Yes, because God will make a difference because God is the only one that can really make the best difference.
That's right.
And the difference that counts. And so we're excited about the opportunity to continue to have amazing love.
Yes.
And it gets more amazing the more willing we are to be surrendered to God. Because, when we come into marriage, one of the things that we don't recognize and we might not get much counseling about is we come into marriage with a me focus. That's all I've ever known is me. And so now I'm coming in to marry this beautiful woman, and she's going to be the love of my life, and we're going to live happily ever after, except that there's one problem. And it's a very big problem that doesn't get discussed very much. She's a me, and I'm a me. And so we're supposed to have two people that come together, that cleave together and become one. And which me shall we be?
And this is where the problem starts, because obviously the way I think and my perspective on life and how I view things, I'm right. So he should be like me.
Yeah, so I'm supposed to be like her, except that I think I'm right too. And, this is laughable when we think about it in those terms, but this is what happens to every couple. We come in, we're supposed to become one, but we have a struggle when there's a difference between how we view things, because certainly she thinks she's right, certainly I think I'm right, and without surrender, without giving God permission to work in us, we end up in disagreements.
That's what happens so often, because he's right or I'm right, but we don't give in towards each other in that love. And so then we experience conflict, and then that conflict goes unresolved. And then we start separating, we start distancing ourselves, and then the gap gets bigger and bigger. And pretty soon we're living in the same home under the same roof, and then we're living kind of two separate lives, trying to kind of get along where we have to, but not really becoming one.
Yeah, and I want to just talk to the guys for a moment here because, and I'm one, so I can say this, that many times, guys, we are clueless, okay? And I hope that doesn't hurt your feelings. But let me tell you what I mean by this idea of being clueless. Many times, we're just going along in the marriage, business as usual, and all of a sudden, something changes. And I'm going to share an example of something that really changed dramatically. I had a guy call me, and he was desperate. And he said, I got home from work today. My house is nearly empty. The table is bare, but there's a letter laying on the table. And it's my wife telling me that it's over. She took the stuff. She took the kids. She's gone. She says, I can't live this way anymore. So this is what I mean by clueless. This guy is calling me, and certainly it's a desperate situation. And I said, so what happened? And he said, I don't know what happened. I mean, she was here yesterday. Everything was the way it's always been, and now she's gone. And I said, are you telling me that you don't even know why your wife left you? He said, no, I've been acting this way most of our married life. And I said, so your wife has probably been giving you some clues. She's probably been telling you that this is not working. And you've heard these things. You've walked right over the top of what you've heard. You've continued to live the way you're living. And suddenly, it seems sudden to you, but it's come to the breaking point for your wife. She can't cope anymore, and she's gone. And he said, yeah. I think I think I get it. So this is what I mean by clueless. This is a drastic example. It's a real life example, but sometimes we just keep going in our ruts and we don't recognize the pain we're causing.
That's right. Both of us as husbands and wife contribute to this problem. And, for us as wives, we shouldn't be giving those clues. We need to give those clues, but we need to be more clear about those clues. We can't be so abstract and coded that they can't decipher what we're saying. So we can say things like this, honey, I really miss the time that we used to have together in the evenings, just a few minutes before I go to bed, where we'd sit and talk about the day instead of, making it coded so he has to try to figure it out. So make it in a positive way, state that in a positive way, and be clear with our messages. But truly, guys, sometimes you expect that with no change in you, nothing changing in your heart, that she's just always going to feel loved and respected and appreciated and secure. And that you have to, as God does with us, we have to in our marriages, and you men have to your wives, grow that love and demonstrate that on a daily basis. Otherwise, that love becomes stale, and it doesn't just plateau, it begins to weaken and go away.
That's right. It begins to die. I remember another situation that we were involved in not long ago, and we actually had gone to another church just to actually surprise some friends of ours and be what we call incognito. We didn't have any responsibilities that weekend, and that actually felt kind of good.
It did.
And so we were just going to go there. It was a surprise. We didn't say anything to anybody. And we got there, and yes, it was a nice surprise for our friends. And we're just partway into the service, and this lady comes up to me, and she kneels down, and she taps me on the shoulder, and she begins to whisper in my ear, I think this is a divine appointment. I think God brought you here today because we've got a couple that is in a desperate marriage situation, and they're planning to go in and file for divorce.
Yeah, that next week they're going into divorce. And yet they come to church together. They have a beautiful young family, and they're still doing, these things together, but both of them have the intention the marriage is over. And she asked if we would be willing to talk with them and see if we could help to bridge the differences. And we said, hey, if they're willing, not if you want us to, but if they want us to, that's a big difference, because sometimes we like to help on the outside. We need to be working on the inside. And so we ended up meeting with this couple, and the wife is describing how the home is looking. She doesn't have affection anymore. He doesn't say he loves her. He doesn't tell her she looks nice. He only asks questions, factual questions like, did you feed the dog? Did you get the kids to school? What's for supper? These kind of things. And there's no connected heart communication, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And she's withering away from the lack of love. And he's sitting there listening, and then finally we look to him and we say, so can you explain what is happening? And he said, well, I just never had a role model. I never saw my dad kiss my mother, show any affection to my mother. I never heard my dad tell my mother that he loved her. And I said to him, he said to us first, I didn't have a good example. I had no example, so I don't know what to do.
Right.
That's when I said to him, okay, before you were married, did you ever tell her that she was beautiful? Oh, yeah. Did you ever take her by the hand and say, I love you? Oh, sure, yeah, I did that, sure. And did you ever put your arm around her tenderly and show affection? Absolutely. I said, how is that possible? Because you had no example. You had no pattern to follow. You knew intuitively what you needed to do to capture her heart. So we're not going to accept the excuse that you don't know what to do, because you did it all before you were married. And no woman would marry a man who didn't somehow convince her that she was loved and desired. So you can do it. It's just you have to have a mindset change.
This was actually an amazing moment, I would say, because as I heard my wife sharing this, I knew this was a direct intervention from God. This was the Holy Spirit giving her the words to speak in that moment. And I think it had way more impact than if I would have said the same thing. But I didn't think of saying this. I'm actually thinking, here's the guy, the poor guy's, he's gotten, but it wasn't
Feeling
really
sorry for him.
a little bit because of what he's describing. But when you said that, it was perfect because this guy did all these things without having a role model because he loved this girl when he was pursuing her. There was nobody telling him, you ought to call her. There was nobody saying, you ought to spend a little time together. He loved spending time with her before they were married. And it's because all of that began to change and she was dying inside. And so those words, I wish we could have had a video of that moment.
Yes, it was like a revelation to him. He caught the vision. It was almost like, is this for real? And she sat there and you could see her whole countenance change because she began to see, yeah, that's right. Because he's been telling his wife, well, I don't know how to, I didn't never have a role model. And we become so accustomed to our excuses and our rationalizations that pretty soon we begin to believe them. And in reality, it's opposite of what happened prior to marriage. And that woman, when we started that session that day, she was done. She felt there was no hope and didn't even want to try, but she was willing to hear the conversation. She was willing to hear what her husband had to say. And after this conversation went on for a while, and as this became part of his awakening, shall we say, she started to get a glimmer of hope. And she started to see, as he started to catch this vision, that yes, maybe love could be rekindled. Maybe it could be new again. And they could really have love and become one the way she desired it.
Yeah, because really what he was going back to was a place that we can call their first love. And sometimes we just need that in our marriages. We need to go back because our love isn't being amazing and we're not reflecting much of God. We need to go back and look at what did we do back then. And I think that in him catching that vision or starting to get a glimpse of it, the neat thing is that he started just spontaneously confessing to her his wrong and how sorry he was for the way it's like his eyes were opened. And it was that I believe kindled hope in her that maybe he's seeing it. Maybe he's going to open his heart up again and he can go back to being more of the person that I fell in love with because he's going to go back to that first love.
Yes, and for her as a woman too, we have to go back to that first love too, because when that's how we're feeling, we become very cold, we become very indifferent, we become very cruel with our words and our emotions and our actions. And so it's really both of them having to make this change. And we did receive a follow-up from that a few weeks later, and they were not divorced. They never went in to file that divorce. They were working through their problems little by little. They were living together and they were starting to see progress in building the marriage that they desired to have, both of them.
And this is the amazing power of God, okay? And this is what makes our love amazing. And we want to talk about 4 key things that we can do to really have amazing love.
The first thing is to commit to daily communication. Now, I know we've talked about that before, and actually in every single presentation, whether we're talking about, the pre-relationship time or getting into relationships, we talked about how important communication is, or parents to children or to teens. We can't overemphasize this enough because communication is the very way that we connect person to person. And in the marriage, we need to look to build our communication.
That's right. And it won't happen by accident. And it certainly doesn't happen well as we just live life business as usual. We can't be in that situation. We've got to become intentional. That's one of our favorite words, is be intentional about having the kind of communication that will make a difference in growing an amazing love together.
And I remember when we first started this, we communicated, okay, like every couple does. But we recognize, and probably me more than he recognized, I miss that more intimate communication. I miss just talking together, just relaxing and sharing life together. And I said to him, honey, I need time every day for communication. And he caught the vision, and so he says, okay, what does that look like for you? How about 5 minutes a day? I said, okay, I'll take it. We'll start with what you can give. And again, it's not that he only talked to me for 5 minutes in a day. We had the general back and forth, here's your lunch for work or whatever, but this was intentional, committed time. And I can tell you, I accepted the 5 minutes without feeling like, well, that's pretty cheap. And it never was 5 minutes. It started off, and that first 5 minutes was 15 minutes, was never less than 15 minutes. And it's grown through the years. So be intentional about taking that time. Make a commitment daily to communication.
Yeah, sometimes we think, oh, daily communication. I mean, wow, life is too busy. Yes, life is too busy. And so it doesn't mean that we cut out daily communication. Because if we cut out daily communication with God, we're destined to lose our way. If we cut out daily communication with the love of our life, this one we've committed to, then we're destined to have our marriage and our love start dying. So we need to make this kind of commitment. We need this communication. We shouldn't be arguing against it. We should say we need to set some priorities here that make a difference in our communication.
And the verse we have here is Ecclesiastes 9, verse 9. It says, and listen to this, guys, enjoy life with the wife whom you love. All right, this is put it right in the positive. Of course you love your wife. Enjoy life with her. That means talk with her. Spend time in that communication. Enjoy life with the wife you love.
And that doesn't happen by accident. So if we're willing, God is certainly willing, and we need to be moving on with this kind of communication. Number 2, be real, be transparent, be open with one another. One of the things that happens is that as communication breaks down, which is where many marriages are today, when there isn't good, strong communication, what happens is that we end up not being real honest in our communication, and we start, maybe avoiding certain things, don't want to talk about certain things. We need to be real and transparent.
Again, this love between a husband and wife is to exemplify God's love to us. And so God is always communicating. He's always trying to reach into our brains through that still small voice. He always is looking and being real with us. He's opening us and helping us see who we really are. He's revealing ourselves to be transparent. We need that in the marriage relationship as well.
Romans 12:9 says, love must be sincere. Hate what is evil and cleave or hang on to that which is good.
That's right. So we want to spend that time being transparent. Don't fake each other out. Don't live a lie. Be honest in your relationship. The third area we want to talk about is resolve differences that you have. Almost every couple have topics or areas of communication or in their marriage relationship that they don't like to talk about. Why? Because every time we come close, there's an argument, there's upset, there's contention. And so we learn how to avoid those areas. And this is not healthy. We need to be able to resolve these things and pass through them, journey past them, so that we can have nothing that's a barrier in our relationship.
Yeah, and this definitely happened to us in our the first couple of years of marriage, which we've shared. We had some really difficult times and breakdowns in communication. And there were 3 areas that we definitely did not do well communicating about. And so we learned how to avoid those areas and just kind of navigate around them.
But the problem was when we did that, we tried to avoid them, but they would still pop up here and there. And every time they came up, it caught the tension was stronger.
Yes.
It was the
Because it was unresolved.
That's right. And we became stronger in our positions that I'm right in this. And if you would only, get your act together, can't you see? And so these areas, because we didn't like the conflict, we would try to avoid more and more, and then they don't go away. They keep coming back up in different circumstances. They show themselves up again.
That's right. So because we were honest in wanting to serve God, and we did love each other, it kind of got buried at times, but because of our love and wanting to grow in our love, we made a commitment to God and to each other that we were going to stop running from these things and deal with them honestly and openly. And so here's the agreement that we made. Very simple, but it's been very powerful
That's right.
in our marriage. And so what we agreed to do is we're going to stop skirting these things. We're going to address them one at a time. We're each going to give the other person the opportunity to express clearly and fully what's on their heart and their perspective. With that, we are going to listen with a desire to really understand the heart of the other person. If at the end of that, neither of us are convinced or come to a clear agreement, we are going to then make the commitment not to argue, not to force.
That's right.
But we are going to then take this to the Lord. We are going to make this our personal study, go to the principles of God's word, and we are going to come to a solution, not my way or her way, but our way with the Lord.
And this was the amazing thing. You know, God always has clear direction in His Word, principles that help us to know how to navigate through life and how to face issues that are uncomfortable.
Right.
We don't have any idea how influenced we are from how we've been raised, and these opinions that we come to as a clear, this is the right way to do things. Because of how we were raised. We're so right because of the influence of our upbringing. And so the very first one we encountered, we went apart, we did our study privately, and I was discovering, wait a minute, I am way off on this. My perspective is not in harmony with the Word of God and the principles there. That was an eye-opener for me. And so I was then willing to surrender to God there, which helps it make it easier to surrender here and to say to my husband, okay, I was way off base. I've been fighting on this issue for over 2 years or more. And clearly, I am humbled. I am wrong.
And I again have to admit, no, I don't have to admit, but I'm going to admit that I really thought I had that I was right on this. And I was confident that when I went to the Lord, I was going to find out that my way was right and we were going to get this resolved. Well, you know, God was very good on this situation. This was the first one that we had made this commitment on. And when I went, I found that I was also wrong in my thinking on this, completely wrong. I'd never really understood the principles. I'd taken it from my home life and what I'd seen happen in my parents, and now I'm finding out I'm wrong. So we're both wrong. What a great place to start by being both wrong.
Have to humble both ourselves.
And humbling ourselves and coming together. And that was such an encouragement to keep going on the other areas we needed to do.
It was. And as we went through the journey through those other ones, it was clearly that one of us was wrong and that we both weren't wrong. But this one was certainly where God started us, and that was so amazing. To come into harmony, to think how much time and heartache we had experienced and wasted on these differences and the agitation and the frustration it caused when we could have settled it much earlier in our relationship. So this is the interesting principle, how God will help each one of us navigate through this. Ezekiel 36:26, he talks about a new heart He will give us. He's going to put in us a new heart, and then He's going to put a new spirit in us, and He's going to take away our stony heart, take out that heart of stone, and He's going to give us a heart of flesh so that we can be tender and open and work through things with our spouse.
Well, it's interesting for ourselves. We've learned this and continue to learn this, but many people say things like this to us when we're counseling. But I've been dealing with this for years. We've been married 50 years and we've never been able to deal with this. How come God can work all these miracles in the Bible and He can't work a miracle for this situation? And this is the scripture right here. He can work. He wants to work this miracle, but here's the problem, okay? It's got to be my choice, our choice as husband and wife, that we are going to surrender for that new heart.
That's right.
God can't give us a new heart if we want to hold on to our old heart. God can't give us a new spirit if we want to hold on to the anger and frustration and I'm right and you're wrong attitude. God can work this miracle just like any of the other miracles in the New Testament if we're willing to surrender and by faith believe that He can change us. He will change us.
That's right. And the fourth key we want to talk about, to good communication is to reach our spouse in the love language that they have. You know, each of us feel loved in different ways. And we often try to love our spouse the way we want love to come to us. And because we are different, pretty rare that we have that same love language. And so we're trying to get them to feel loved and to love us back. And it seems like what we do isn't working. And my husband's love language is words of affirmation. There's this test you can take. It's called the 5 Love Languages. There's a book you can get called the 5 Love Languages. It is very powerful. And we encourage every couple to do that. So here, his love language is words of encouragement. And the reason, before we were married, I had lots of accolades for him and words of encouragement. But after things started going wrong in the early part of our marriage, I had a critical tongue. I had a sharp tongue. I was very negative towards him. And the more I tried to help him see my point so that he could love me the way I wanted to be loved, the more I was pushing him away, because I wasn't giving him the words that he needed to feel loved and accepted.
You see, as Alane said, our default mode or our natural mode is that we want to give what we want to receive. And so, you know, I could be speaking words of affirmation to her because that's what I'm desiring. Fortunately, we have kind of our 1 and 2. Yours is touch and then words of affirmation.
That's right.
Mine's words of affirmation, then touch. So there's the 5 love languages. Those are our top 2, which helps get us closer. But if you're in a situation, and I remember one couple we talked to, the guy just built this beautiful shelf for his wife, and he was very handy. And she wasn't very excited about it. And finally he said, I don't understand this.
I do all these things for you and you don't appreciate them.
And she said, I just want you to sit down beside me on the couch for 15 minutes, would you please? Because her love language was quality time. His love language was acts of service. And he was doing all these acts of service and totally missing the boat.
Yeah, and she wasn't doing acts of service. She was wanting him to come and spend
right.
that time with her. And so for us, you know, before we were married, you would often take my hand or put your arm around me. But after we got married, those types of physical contact dropped off, and it was really more focused on the bedroom at the end of the day. And so I wasn't feeling loved because these other actions or these other forms of meeting my love language he wasn't aware of them. And that's why I got sharp with him. And then I would try to come and give him the kind of love, you know. But it's like, whoa, you just, you know, machine gun me with your words and now you want to do this. It's like those things don't go together. So pay attention to the love language of your spouse and minister to them in their love language. That's why I've changed how I speak to him, which grows his love and it grows our love together.
You still tell me the truth.
I still tell you the truth.
Yeah, because we can't just make things up. It
That's
has to
right.
be real. So the 5 love languages, if you haven't really come across them, is words of affirmation, touch, acts of service, quality time, and gifts. So that may resonate with you as you hear those things, but like you said earlier, you can take that little love language test on the, it's online, and you can start tuning in to what really makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. So going back to where we started, God's love for us to be one with him. That's what the marriage is meant to be. It's meant to represent that oneness. And the only way we have the oneness in our marriage is if we will take action to start doing these steps or these keys
That's
in our
right.
relationship. So we want to challenge you with a 30-day challenge. This is a little different than the other things we've given you along the way. These are things that you can do and begin to implement. But now we're going to challenge you for this for 30 days.
Yes, don't give up on this. It's worth 30 days. The first thing, going back to the 4 keys, number 1 is the commitment to daily communication. I remember we ended up in a counseling session. We were doing meetings in a location, and this guy came to me and he said, we're in a desperate situation. Our communication is completely broken and we're headed towards separation. Would you guys be willing to take some personal time with us during these meetings? And of course, we said we'd be happy to do that. So the four of us got together, and in the process of talking, I said to him, you need to make a commitment for 30 days to communicate with your wife in a meaningful way. Make the time and take the time. And he just erupted and said, 30 days.
Yeah, it was a moment that was very devastating for his wife.
I mean, if you could have seen the look on his wife's face, they're in a desperate situation. Their communication is broken.
He's trying to fix the situation. He wants to fix it. And so 30 days, I mean, how hard is that? 30 days. You spent more time wooing her heart than 30 days.
That's right. And so this is the ruts we fall into. And I said to him, so you run your own business. Yeah. It's like, what does that have to do with this conversation? I said, you got your bachelor's degree in business. Yeah. I said, did you ever feel like giving up on that? Oh, yeah, many times. Did you give up? No. You still stayed with your business? Did it just happen overnight? No, it took years. I said, did you give up? No. And now you're saying 30 days is too much energy to put into rebuilding your marriage? He goes, I get it. Turned to his wife, I'm so sorry, honey. You are worth it. I want to make this commitment.
Yeah, so again, the 30 days, because we know that research has proved that usually in 14 days or 2 weeks, we can start a new habit. So we want to double that because this is a habit that needs to be very strong in our marriages because we'll see the benefit of that. So that's why we challenge us to a 30-day challenge. We have done this in our relationship, and we've even said, okay, if we make a mistake, we're going to start the 30 days over because we want to not have days that keep dipping off in poor communication.
Yeah,
we
with a lot of lousy excuses.
Yeah, we just want to keep growing that. And so now the love that we experience is so much richer. And we still have dips in our relationship, but they don't come as often as they used to. And they're not as hard as they used to be.
That's right.
And we get through them faster than we used to. So this is the benefit of the 30 days. The second thing is, in this next 30 days in your relationship, be real, be honest, be transparent. Don't hide, don't avoid, don't deceive in your relationship.
And I've talked to guys, and it's not just guys, but I'm a guy, and I'm telling you that I've talked with many guys, and they say, but if I do that, she'll probably separate from me because I've done some things that are bad, and I've been into pornography, and I've had some real issues. And I said, if your wife sees that you are ready to be honest, because she already knows you're dishonest. You may not know she knows, but she knows. The Spirit is telling her that. Be willing to do this, and your wife will be willing to see that there's hope for your marriage.
The next area in this 30 days is start bringing up, not all of them, but one area that you can't agree on, that you avoid, and say, okay, we want to work through this. We don't want to have this barrier in our relationship anymore. So pick one of those areas and agree on that, because sometimes she'll have her areas and he'll have his areas.
Right.
And just pick one, and then prayerfully and through the Word of God and with a heart to resolve the difference, work through it. If you did one in 30 days, you're going to be so much further ahead. The next 30 days, if there's another one, bring up another one. We're not talking about doing one a day. It's too much. You can't conquer all of that in a short period of time, but we can conquer and become effective in learning how to communicate and to be different as we build this in our marriages.
And number 4, learn what is the love language of your wife or your husband. Learn what that love language is. This is not rocket science, but it is very helpful to get on, kind of hit the target, so to speak. And so take the time, if you don't already know, take the time to figure it out. If you do already know, prayerfully take the time to begin making a difference in how you reach that love language. Because if you will, God will continue to grow your love into a love that is so amazing and a little bit more representative of the love of God towards his people.